You can't perceive it. That's only natural. You see, names that have been eaten are apparently erased from the past, the present, and even from individuals' memories. Even with my power to take control over everything, I'm beginning to forget the names that are gone. Do you remember what the Nazis did to the Jews? Nazis, World War II, Arnold syndrome, SOA, AIDS, nuclear weapons, the Mount Hilo eruption. All of these once existed and were feared every bit as much as the devils with their names. But I'm the only one who remembers those names now, because Chainsaw Man ate them all up. The ability to erase concepts is quite fitting for the hero of hell, yet it also has some drastic consequences and implications. But how does it actually work? This is a difficult question to answer, and we are limited by the in-universe research presented in the story. Let's cite a little from them. After Pochita is subsequently released through Denji's traumatic uncovering of Nayata's death, public safety begins to implement a plan to uncover how the erasure power works. According to the Prime Minister of Japan, Kentaro Ishida, in existing transcripts they had discussed never hearing of the word ear before, and yet possess no memory of the conversation after the ear devil is barfed back up by Pochita. Additionally, all 27 archivists in various divisions of public safety were able to substantiate the erasure and restoration of ears. Fumiko elucidates this further. According to the research conducted during the 3 minutes and 50 seconds that ears were erased, in a world without ears, hearing didn't disappear, cell phones and radios still existed, and ear picks were sold as an arts and crafts product. Chainsaw Man's power appears to be quite selective. It furthermore does not seem able to change much regarding the continuity of the world if these other various items still exist. At least it would appear that way at first glance. There have been many theories that have sought to answer the question of what Chainsaw Man is and why he has that power, but with such limited information it is hard to find one conclusive. Is Pochita the Chainsaw or Chainsaw Man devil, for instance? Denji's reaction to the words in the final chapter would be one indication. Or it could be that, as one commenter, Sabrina the Pikachu, suggests, Pochita was the Hope Devil. When comparing Denji's encounters with the zombified Yakuza between the first and final chapters of the series, we can see that the Nozo kanji, in Nozomu, from chapter 1 is removed and changed to Motomeru, to seek, in chapter 232. The kanji Nozo, at least from some light internet investigation, seems to mean to wish for, desire for, or hope for. The rest of the chapter bears this theory out. While the English translation has Denji using the word wish in relation to having only good dreams and in regards to going to school, the original script is more careful. In the former case, Denji wonders if he could only have good dreams, and in the latter, he too wanted to go to school. Denji in particular appears accepting of things around him, devoid of personal agency even at the moment of his death. That is, of course, before his meeting with Asa ignites a spark inside his heart. Aspiration, a wish, a hope to be the Chainsaw Man she just thanked, that just saved her from tripping over the chicken devil. Perhaps a hope to see that girl once more in the future. But if Pochita is the Hope Devil, then why chainsaws? At the origin of its creation, the original purpose of a chainsaw was to assist in childbirth and remove diseased bones. Chainsaw Man seems to take on those aspects when, on the one hand, it removes the concept from existence, treating it as a disease and allowing history to form around it, and, on the other hand, gives impetus to new ideas and concepts, even introducing old ones into the world through barf. Of course, even in that light, the character in the story's ending itself are certainly vague. Without fully understanding Pochita's power of erasure, it would appear that Fujimoto denied the entire experience of his characters. Does Pochita not deny Denji's striving for more, his hope for better? Perhaps not as consciously planned or implemented, there is more to the story than that. Denji's struggles throughout the story have a common through line with the rest of the story's characters. It's a problem of progress. When I went hungry as a little kid, that's what I'd eat, from the park's public restroom. But once I stopped going hungry, I stopped being able to eat toilet paper. Do you get what I'm saying? I can never go back to the way things used to be. The subject of progress has been a complicated topic in Chainsaw Man, and not just because of the ending or Denji's own personal struggle with it, as we will touch upon later, but rather how one approaches progress has been a predominant theme throughout the story. In envisioning a better world than the current one, or a disastrous future, the role played by necessity breaks out into the open with monstrous consequences. To defend their cruel and violent actions, the Yakuza in the story of Chainsaw Man characterize themselves as a necessary evil. Through their presence, they keep Japanese people safe from foreign mafias, and without the Yakuza, the Japanese nation would be finished. But Makima disagrees, seeing the contradiction as only an excuse and justification, unnecessary to society. Moreover, the truly necessary evils are always kept collared and controlled by the state. This can be interpreted both as Fujimoto's critique of state institutions, to which Japan, the US, the Soviet Union, China, and Germany have all in some form been subject, and it can also serve as Makima's approach to herself and her future actions. The destruction of Denji's happiness, his hope, was a horrific necessary evil leading to an immense amount of deaths, all in pursuit of awakening Pochita. Even Denji, desiring to escape from relentless abuse, had participated in his own form of necessary evil with the killing of his father. Above all, necessity in Makima's desired better world called for the erasure of many things that humanity would be happier without, such as death, war, and famine. The use of Chainsaw Man's erasure power, however, gives way to the other side of the coin that is this motif: avoidance. While Denji's avoidance of that ominous door, the reality of having killed his father, is one such example of avoidance, Part 2 is where the theme becomes paramount. In Asa's case, an explicit mention is made to necessary evil when she must choose to be trapped under Yoru's control forever, or avoid that fate by turning Denji into a weapon. But the primary source for the appeal to necessary evils in the pursuit of avoidance, alongside a contemptible form of progress, is public safety. Already at the aquarium early on, does Yoshida ask Denji, "Do you think Chainsaw Man would eat it for us? The Death Devil?" With the coming end of the age of humans as proclaimed by Nostradamus' prophecy, public safety, and Fami's group with the Chainsaw Man Church, seek to do anything to prevent the prophecy of mass death from unfolding. And more than anything else, who they need to accomplish that is the Chainsaw Man who can erase names from existence. Yes, while Buri may consider his murder of Nayata cruel, which involved even feeding parts of her to Denji, he does it to save the world. There's no way around it. In public safety's case, 10,000 children is a small price to pay for the future of Japan. Fumiko states that public safety's true goal is human evolution. Harmful substances, nations, and more. With Chainsaw Man's power, we can remove their very concepts, making civilization even more, well, you know the rest. In reality, the leadership of public safety wishes to deny hardship and progress altogether, and uphold an eternal state of Japanese exceptionalism, whether it was the erasure of the Death Devil or Aging Devil. The doing away with a perceived evil or a necessary entity through avoidance, or erasure, is already a position long since confronted by Denji himself, and thus Fujimoto, when it came to Makima. When asked if there would still be crappy movies in the world she sought to create, Makima replied, "Personally, I believe the world would be better if bad movies ceased to exist." For Denji, that response only affirmed the need to kill her after all. Aided in some respects by Komani's words, Denji believes that a reality without bad things isn't worth living in. Good movies are nothing without bad movies, seems to be the lesson that Denji learned on his date with Makima. With that in mind, we may add an additional point as we move forward. Without bad movies, good movies couldn't even come to be.
I repeat, breaking news, I repeat, this just in. In the ongoing war between the Soviet Union and the USA, America has reportedly dropped a new bomb weapon on several Soviet cities. We have yet to learn the extent of the damage to the cities. However, according to information released by the American military, the weapon is extremely lethal and was planned to be used on devils. Understood. I have an update. Okay. According to this new information, this weapon that was dropped on the Soviets is an extremely powerful bomb-like weapon that mainly uses uranium or plutonium, what's called atomic energy. The American military used this weapon for the first time as a fast track to ending the war. Oh? We have the weapon's name now.
At the outbreak of the First World War, there was an overall sense of jubilation amongst the German people. The war had given way to a fraternal community and sense of prevailing culture that had overcome class, language, and religion, as the youth enthusiastically enlisted in the cause. Great intellectuals, too, were wrapped up in the collective excitement, like the sociologist and economist Max Weber, who referred to the occasion as a grand and marvelous war. The same kind of enthusiasm is depicted here within the American population, who gleefully celebrate the dropping of nuclear weapons on the Soviet Union, even as the whole world crumbles around them. As the First World War persisted, revealing itself as a horrific catastrophe, whereby the masses were sacrificed on the altar of imperial plunder, and despite certain attempts by political leaders such as Herbert Hoover to frame the war as a purifying and refining endeavor, such festivity no longer resonated with the public, and had instead passed into its opposite. Not even the triumphant success of Hitler's Blitzkrieg 20 years later could recreate the enthusiasm of July-August 1914 in Germany, precisely due to the major historical experience of the First World War. But in Chainsaw Man, the terrible consequences from the nuclear bombing of Japan had been erased, and instead now gave way to a fresh celebration of nuclear attacks and the destruction of an entire people. In this light, we can begin to understand why Pochita is the most harmful devil to humanity in Chainsaw Man. A devil that can not only erase concepts, but can also erase entirely the historical experiences that play an integral role in human progress. For Hegel, the theorist of the rationality of the historical process par excellence, the experience of the suffering and seriousness of the negative cannot be erased. Humanity's capacity to learn and struggle towards realizing freedom is dependent on the approach to these real objective contradictions. Erasing those major historical experiences also, in turn, erases their impact. We have already seen the lengths to which Makima and public safety went to avoid or erase what they pose as contradictions to an idealized form of existence. In the last instance, Fumiko asked Denji to eat the Death Devil because the overwhelming existence of wars cannot be overcome. Stuck in a pessimistic worldview and far removed from an analysis of the course of history, her only solution to mankind's march towards its own doom is for mankind to live on forever. Of course, once Chainsaw Man does eat Death Devil, the consequences for humanity are worse than fatal. Foreshadowed by the increased strength of Locust Devil, the disappearance of death destabilizes the existing course of nature. Bugs are able to multiply exponentially, with no regard for their previously small life cycle, while human beings are eaten alive, forced to live and suffer eternally as the flesh and blood of bugs and beasts. In this case, the removal of the negative not only removes the potential for progress, but destroys humanity entirely. So much for saving humanity through committing to necessary evils. On the other hand, Denji's killing of his father is seen as an important step in Denji's life, in an overall justified act in a world that is often depicted as cruel and abusive. The culmination of Denji coming to terms with such a decision is directly tied to his own self-actualization and his pursuit of a third choice. Necessary evil is critiqued only insofar as it is in pursuit of selfish and reactionary aims. Furthermore, the struggle through necessity is what provides the impetus for personal growth. So when Pochita eats a devil and strips away the collective or individual struggle against it, he removes the potential for development. And yet, Pochita, and by extension Fujimoto, is at least partially aware of this fact. Trapped in Aging Devil's world, Pochita forces Denji to barf up certain devils that happen to bring up positive memories of Aki, Power, Rize, and Naita. Denji concludes that Pochita barfed them up to make him remember. If Pochita is aware of the impact of remembering devils, we may wonder how aware he is of the damage caused by forgetting them. Polemics that target the theorization of the historical process and the recent critiques of Chainsaw Man's ending happen to coincidentally touch upon a similar theme.
What about individual or collective agency?
For the latter, the critique focuses upon Denji and how Pochita eating himself destroyed Denji's agency in the story, alongside Asa's for that matter. This is an understandable position, although Pochita's actions in eating devils has determined many of the elements of the story outside of that moment. Above all, however, Denji's progress too is marked by the consequences of avoidance. Chainsaw Man, at least in regards to Denji himself, is at its core a narrative about a struggle for recognition. Whether that central protagonist is Denji or Asa, the quest to win recognition, to achieve self-esteem in the face of self-defeat, abuse, and dehumanizing is front and center. From Denji's horrific socioeconomic circumstances at the beginning of the story, to being owned as a dog by public safety, even lapsing into a position where he desired to be a dog and forego his autonomy to Makima, and finally, being brought to his knees by his issues with hypersexuality, often taken advantage of by Yoru. The issues Denji faces in both parts, but takes an even stronger form in part 2, are summed up well by Yoru herself. You poor man, your family's been killed, you're a slave to your sex drive, you got beaten to a pulp, and even though I'm going to turn you into a weapon, you're like putty in my hands, because I'm the only one who's nice to you. The fact that Asa and Yoru like him is a fact that he's especially grateful for. Denji wishes to be seen by others, not as a separated entity from Chainsaw Man, but as himself. Denji's heart is a human heart, after all. But he also wants to be seen as Chainsaw Man, whereby his identity is revealed for the whole world to see. Unfortunately for Denji, without a support system to aid him, he lapses into his emotional and physical desires, avoiding his issues and remains stuck in a loop of tragic self-pity. No doubt a problem exacerbated by his contract with Pochita, as often when he's faced with these terrible events and circumstances, Pochita switches in to deal with the problem. The role of necessity in overcoming the state of inactuality is cancelled out by Pochita at the individual level as well. The process of catharsis, that transition from the emotional and reactive to a rational analysis, is denied for Denji. Thus, we may return to the ending of the story once more. After their death, Denji and Pochita are able to talk once more side by side, but this is certainly not a positive conversation. Pochita makes it clear that the sex and unlimited kisses were not good for Denji to have gotten. A statement we can really agree with, given that the conditions that those actions were going to be situated in were problematic, to say the least. But Pochita goes further. He touches upon something we all must have noticed. Denji was still unhappy in some ways despite the good he was obtaining from life. He was apparently far happier starving and suffering, fighting devils, and eating spoiled bread in that run-down shack. There can be no doubt. Denji had a mind that could only find heaven when you're in hell. Pochita then eats himself, and we are forced to return back to the time of the first chapter. At least, that's what we are presented with. But if we go by how Pochita's power has worked thus far, with some exceptions given how monumental a change it would be to lose the force that can and had removed entire historical experiences, then likely a similar line of events will have transpired to make things how they were before just without Pochita existing. A history bent around the newly changed reality. But why would Pochita say this? Why would Fujimoto write this? An answer may be found in what we have discussed so far, and could be aided by one more addition. Asa's confrontation with Yoru, after Yoru crashes herself into a wall trying to avoid a bird, is perhaps very illuminating. When asked why she would leave Asa alive and with some autonomy, Yoru reveals that the bird whose body she stole still felt guilty for catching and eating worms, for an act necessary for survival. Yoru saw empathy as a path to stronger weapons. Guilt was precisely what made Asa much better at the task, but Yoru could never understand it. In the end, Asa, the things you think are sins are nothing in a devil's eyes. In that optic, we might argue that Pochita, as a devil, could not comprehend the negative tendency and its part in the historical process, on a macro-historical level or in regards to social being. He could not comprehend Denji's changes or the actuality of development as a whole. That learning to be dissatisfied with eating toilet paper in the midst of improving social conditions and the desire for better is a good thing, an important thing for humanity's development. Pochita's power, by eating devils and erasing their concept with no regard to its impact on the world, impeded Denji and humanity as a whole. And so, whether Pochita knew it or not, for the world to move forward, Pochita had to disappear. With the death of Pochita, although he comes back in a new form when Asa reinvents the concept, the historical process is revived. Alongside the return of hope, if that is what Pochita truly is, Denji and humanity as a whole can strive for what they wish for, a better place for themselves. Agency is fully restored, and this time people must actually grapple with existing conditions, instead of avoiding or erasing them altogether. The ending might be vague, and it's absolutely poorly executed, but it would suggest that this is a world where Denji can start anew with much greater control over his life than before, as long as he tackles his problems head on. So, did Fujimoto consciously intend to intervene in the great philosophical and political debates on progress and the historical process from the 20th century? No. There's almost no way that's true. But whatever political developments Fujimoto may have had in the background while working on Chainsaw Man, the reality is that his work here touches upon many of those themes by the consequence of introducing Pochita's ability and designing the story around that. The interpretation he puts forward, regardless of intentionality or consciousness, captures something very real and is useful to explore, and hopefully entertaining to explore as well. With that said, thank you for watching.